You know, I'm something of a podcast myself. I'm something of a podcast myself. You know, I'm something of a podcast. I'm something of a podcast. I'm something of a podcast myself.
All right. Well, welcome to yet another episode of Something of a Podcast, the only podcast brave enough to say, I'm something of a podcast myself. I am your host, Mike Gamms, and with me, as always, is the incredibly talented Kai VonDoom. Say hello, Kai.
Hello, Kai.
I see what you did there. That's pretty good. You should be a comedian.
I get that all the time.
Yeah, me too. I'm the funniest guy at my office. All my friends say, I could be a good stand-up. I could be the next Shane Gillis if I put my mind to it. We'll get to the Shane Gillis of it all in a little bit because, as you know, we've talked about SNL the last 2 weeks, and now the whole world is talking about SNL, so we might as well join in on that. But let's get to that a little later. Anything on your mind up top here that you wanted to talk about before we get into my bullet points I got here?
No, let's get straight into the bullet points. There's
All
no
right.
new Love is Blind right now, so
Which also the whole world's been talking about Love is Blind. We were way ahead of that. Well, not way ahead of that trend, but right on point with that trend. I had a bunch of random people reach out to me, like people I would not expect, be like, I love that show. Like one of my dudist friends, like he's just a total dude through and through, but he has a girlfriend now. So he
oh
messaged me like,
yeah.
"Oh, I love that show. It's so hilarious." I'm like, "Oh, I know why you
All the
watch it,
bros
but
are watching with their girlfriends. It's
and
so
liking
funny.
it." Yeah, exactly. uh um so yeah, that's Love is Blind is exciting. It's in the cultural zeitgeist at the moment. Um Unfortunately, I have some other TV news which is not good TV news. It's very sad TV news. And that is Hulu just announced last week that they have canceled the show This Fool after 2 seasons. Did you hear about that, Kai?
I did. I'm devastated.
Yeah,
It was such a good show.
it's a bummer.
So
So you've seen
funny,
both
so smart.
seasons?
I have. Yep.
Yeah. I have a lot to say about it, but why don't you start tell the those who don't know, tell them about This Fool, or start to at least.
Yeah, so it was created by Chris Estrada. He's an amazing comic, so funny. It's like set in LA. It's like a Latinx story, a lot of dark humor in this show, which I personally love. It's one of the funniest shows on television, but I don't know a lot of people who watch it. I think you're the only friend I have who's seen it.
Who's seen it? Yeah. That's kind of the case with a lot of my friends too. I've been working on trying to get people into watching it. But yeah, no, I love This Fool. They just had a second season on Hulu. And like you said, it was created by Chris Estrada is one of the main creators, and he's the main character. He plays Julio. And it takes place in South Central in Los Angeles, in the South Los Angeles. And Julio plays um how do you put it? Like he's like a social worker almost for this group called Hugs Not Thugs, which is like a
Yeah.
program to reform, rehabilitate ex felons, who have recently been released, particularly in his Latinx community. And the main point of the show is that his cousin Lewis, who's played by Frankie Quinones, who's absolutely hysterical.
Yes.
His cousin, who was also his bully when they were kids, like picked on him all the time, is out and in the program, and he needs Julio, Chris Estrada's character, to be his uh, basically caseworker, case manager, as he goes through this process of rehabilitating. And the contrast between, or the conflict between those two characters is incredibly hilarious. Uh, where the Frankie Quinones character who just got out of prison, he's still set in the mindset of like when he went in there, and he's like, like for example, he's always making gay jokes to Chris Estrada, to Julio's character, not like in a super malicious way, just like that's how he talks, because he's like, he has a 2005 brain. And
Yeah.
Julio has to sort of teach him like, we don't call people gay anymore, like that's not what we do, that's not cool, and stuff like that. And uh in addition to those two, who are the two main leads being absolutely hysterical, uh one of the other main supporting characters is Michael Imperioli from The Sopranos, uh, which he is just absolutely awesome on this show. He's so funny as sort of like the leader of Thugs Not, or Hugs Not Thugs. He's basically Julio's boss, Chris Estrada's boss at the Hugs Not Thugs. And he's just he's like a burnt out, like lefty social worker, anti-capitalist, like bleeding heart, like super liberal lefty, and he's just completely frustrated with the whole nonprofit system after doing it for so many years. And also happens to be a very gifted sword swinger. Not his actual sword, but that's a dick joke, which you have to, if you haven't seen the show, you should watch it and you'll get that dick joke. But no, it's one of the funniest shows I've ever seen. It only had 2 seasons. The second season came out during the writer's strike, which is like one of the main part of the problems. Hulu does a terrible job promoting a lot of their shows, and this one is like a Hulu only show. It came out during the writer's strike, where an actor strike, where none of the people on the show could promote it, and it was a show that's kind of needed the promotion of the people on it to really put it out there. And I want to talk about a specific episode of the show. So in the first season, episode number 5 is what really changed my life. Like, I'd started watching the show and I was getting into it, but when I got to I think it's the 5th episode in the first season, it is perhaps the funniest episode of television I've ever seen in my life. It's the Austin Powers episode. Do you remember the Austin Powers episode?
Yes.
It is the funniest thing I've ever seen in my life, and I don't want to like spoil it all, but like I said with Frankie's character, he's kind of stuck in the past, and most of his cultural references are like dated. So he's constantly making like, "Do I make you Randy?" jokes, and like he's Austin Powers, and they're trying to explain to him why that's problematic. But then there's this huge overall like arc that kind of flips that on its end, and you'll never look at Austin Powers again the same way after watching this episode. It's the funniest thing. And I just absolutely love it. Do you have any other I have a story I want to tell you about this fool that's kind of funny to me, but I wanted to see, do you have any other what else do you have to say about this fool?
I just feel like when you find out a show is canceled, a lot of times people don't want to watch it because they don't want to invest in something that they feel won't be completed and they won't have that sense of closure. But Chris Estrada said like several times he's written each season of the show like it's going to be the last.
Mm-hmm.
Because, shows like this don't get to last very long anyways. So these 2 seasons were both so good, excellent television. Definitely don't let the show being canceled stop you from watching it, because shows get revived all the time. So I think we should all just watch it and tell Hulu we want the shit back.
Absolutely, because it could get picked up by another network or a lot of different things like that. And it definitely has closure, and there's 2 seasons, and it doesn't feel like if you watch it, you're like, oh, well, I only watched the first chapter of this. There's more missing. Like, even if there was just 1 season, you could watch the first season and be like, this is standalone, a great season of television. It's not required to have the second. And the same thing with the second season. It builds off the first season, but it's not. Yeah, you don't feel like you're left on a cliffhanger. Um, so another interesting thing about this show is I don't know if you caught this, but so Chris Estrada is one of the creators, but there's also Matt Ingebrigtsen and Jake Wiseman are two of the other creators, and they're the creators and stars of that show Corporate. If you remember that show, it was on Comedy Central for a little while.
I've actually never seen that one.
I see. Yeah, well, a lot of people didn't see it. That's why it's not on Comedy Central anymore. Um, but it was like it's like a workplace comedy. I honestly didn't really watch it. I saw little bits of it, but because it's like after The Office and then Workaholics, I kind of was already like kind of burned out on the workplace comedy thing. But Matt Ingebrigtsen and Jake Wiseman are the two creators of that show and this show, and their characters from Corporate make cameos in both seasons of the show. They show up in their like suits for like their whatever their role is from that, but they're both writers and creators of the show with Chris Estrada. And I guess there's one other, Pat Bishop, who I'm not super familiar with. But I know Matt Ingebrigtsen is an extremely funny comic from Los Angeles, a really good writer. Him and Jake Wiseman are a really great writing team. And Matt Ingebrigtsen actually did one of my shows years ago before was on Corporate. But the funny, kind of funny, at least I think it's a funny story. You'll tell me if it's funny, I guess, after this is so last year I was in Los Angeles. You remember this year? For those that don't know, me and Kai did the 51st Joke Show this year, right? In Buffalo, which is when they do it in a bunch of different cities where the beginning of the year, 50 different comics all get together and they tell their first joke of the year, a new joke. And it's kind of like a mixer for comedians in whatever city you're in. There'll be 50 comedians there. Well, I went to the one in Los Angeles. I wasn't on it that year. I've done it in the past, but so I'm just there hanging out with 50 of like the biggest comics in Los Angeles. And I have some friends there and I know some of them. And I've at this point never heard of the show This Fool. And then I meet a guy there named Chris Estrada. I meet him there at 51st Jokes. And I'm talking to him, and he's a super nice guy, but I don't know who he is. He wasn't on my radar yet. His show wasn't on my radar. Then I continue. I'm in LA. I continue to see Chris Estrada all the time, and he remembers me. Every time he sees me, comes up to me, is the nicest guy in the world. And then I'm hearing whispers like, oh, he's got this show, This Fool. I see him do a full stand-up set, and I'm like, wow, this guy is actually hilarious. He crushes. And I still haven't watched This Fool yet, and I'm just like, this is a nice guy who remembers my name, and he's pretty funny. Then I go see him again, and he absolutely crushes a show again. And then I'm at I went to this show Hot Tub in Los Angeles, which is Kristen Shaw and Kurt Bronner's show. They do it like semi regularly at Permanent Records. It's like a record store in Los Angeles. And I go there, and Frankie Quinones comes on stage, who I've never heard of at that time. And like he's from the show This Fool. And I'm like, I keep hearing about this show. He goes on stage and absolutely crushes. And then now I finally, after all this, decided to watch This Fool after I left Los Angeles. And I've seen this. I seen Chris Estrada like 10 times in a matter of 5 months before I seen the show. Now I've seen the show, and I think it's the most brilliant thing ever. And I it's just so funny because I literally saw the guy all the time and had no idea that like, and he was nice to me, and I had no idea he made one of the funniest shows in television. And it's not that funny of a story. It's just kind of odd, you know. And I like to name drop, so. But yeah, that's like the gist of it. And so it's kind of like I hope I could get back to LA soon and tell Chris Estrada if I see him like, yo, your show's like the funniest thing I've ever seen on television in a long time. It's one of my favorite shows, and I'm very sad that it was canceled. And I encourage everyone to go out there and watch it on Hulu, and maybe it'll get brought back somewhere else. But if not, it still exists as a very great show, and we will see what these folk do after that. It's really helped elevate Chris Estrada's career and Frankie Quinones. And I'm sure that Matt Ingebrigtsen and Jake Wiseman, the writers and creators, will have another show coming soon, or we're not seeing the last of any of these creators. So I look forward to seeing what they have next.
For sure.
Yeah. Um, yeah. So that's This Fool. Very good show, and we hope to have it back sometime soon. And um, yeah. So that is, yep. And any further thoughts on that? I think we could probably move on from This Fool. I could just keep repeating myself about how funny it is, and mention. Did I mention that I've met some of the guys in the show before? Did I mention that?
No, I don't think you have
Yeah.
actually. I think you should say it
I
10
should
more
I
times.
should mention that I'm adjacent to people who are much more talented and funny and successful than me every once in a while. That's kind of what I've based my whole career off of, is proximity to people more talented than me, which is why I co-host a podcast with VonDoom.
Thank you.
Yeah. um, yeah. So I guess we should address the Saturday Night Live sized elephant in the room, I guess. Did you watch any of this week's Saturday Night Live with Shane Gillis?
So I watched the musical performances
Who was the
and I saw
guest?
it was 21 Savage.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've seen his monologue. I've seen Shane Gillis' monologue, which was interesting.
Yeah. See, this is it's a difficult conversation for me to me right now, because any of the things that I want to say about it was done on purpose to make people like me say those things. Like,
Mm,
he uses a hard R in there. He calls
yeah.
people gay as a pejorative. It wasn't like an accident. It wasn't like he didn't know what he was doing. It was intentionally designed to create discourse.
Yeah.
He wants the whole point is, it doesn't matter whether you like his set or not. It's all about fueling the culture wars, and it's a battle line for the culture wars between the right wing free speech people and the other side. And it's like, it's a designed thing to get people to have the discourse that we're having. More people are talking about Saturday Night Live this week because of Shane Gillis's episode than they have all season, and that's because they created this controversy. It's all manufactured. And the reason he drops these words, like he says the R word in there, in the context of it, he does it in a way where it's like it could be defended, like there's some mental gymnastics that could be done, but it's done just as like a breadcrumb for the he's virtue signaling. That side likes to claim that the left like to virtue signal, but he's literally virtue signaling to the people that are just like, he said the no words. He's a warrior in a culture war. Like, it doesn't matter if he's funny or talented. That's besides the point. It's particularly on the right. They're like, if this guy's on our side, we support everything they do. They rapidly will support things that they think are not just on their side, but putting down the other side, or like, it's all about owning the libs or whatever, kind of. I don't know. What do you think?
I could see that. I also think it's not even just about like liberals versus the right. I think it's just white dudes who feel like they're being phased out of comedy on all sides. And they're just like, well, now we're going to be like free speech. We're going to say what we want. We're going to take back comedy or whatever, which is, I actually do think Shane Gillis is funny. I've seen his most recent special, and I've actually seen him perform at, the comedy club in Rochester. And I think he is funny. He does have some really smart premises. It's just that he also throws in, like you said, these like trigger words where people are going to be talking about him. Because Shane Gillis is funny, but that's not going to get the average American to tune into Saturday Night Live. They're like, I don't know who this is. I'm not going to watch it. But now that they're like, oh, he's tearing down the woke mob of SNL, as Fox News said.
Yeah, you
So
sent me that
now they're like,
headline that you saw on
yeah.
Fox News.
Yeah. So now, like you said, he's like their champion. He's like bringing comedy back to white men or whatever. Whether he wants that or not, I don't
He
know if it's
totally
just like
does. I
publicity.
think he's a very much a willing participant in he knows exactly what his place is and what he's doing. Um,
Mhm.
and I didn't cut you off, did I? Did you have?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead,
Well,
or go ahead.
I'll just say one more thing. It's just like as comedians, we know that every word we choose is so intentional. We'll like agonize over like, should I say white or like I don't know, cream for
Mhm.
describing a color? Which one's funnier? Like we every word is intentional, everything we do is intentional. So I do think he is a willing participant to some degree, but it's just like what he
Yep.
definitely wants to trigger people, but it's just like why? What is he getting out of this?
Well, um, I think I have an answer to that question. What is he getting out of it? And I'll answer it in a long way because I wanted to bring up something else that I think is very relevant to this that just also happened this week. And I don't know if you've seen this, but a comedy club in Seattle, comedy slash bar, canceled 4 shows that were upcoming at their club and sent a letter to the performers saying that they canceled them because their community, basically saying the community didn't want that type of performer to be at the club, right? And it was the people that got their shows canceled were Louis J. Gomez. Um, who's the other one? That's his buddy there. Dave Smith, Jim Florentine, and Kurt Metzger, because they all had the same representatives. And even right before we started recording this, I saw Jim Florentine posted his new episode of his podcast called Jim Gets Canceled. Like, that's the whole thing. This is what these people want. They want to be the victims in the culture war. You said something when you were speaking just now that was really interesting to me, is you said, no, I'm losing it. Hold on. That they think these white dude edgelord types think that they're need to win back comedy, that they've been phased out of comedy, when it's the exact opposite.
Yeah.
Like, I hate
Yep.
to admit it, we are losing the culture war to these people when it comes to comedy. 100%.
Yep.
These people are the biggest names in comedy. I can't meet a stranger who tells me that they like comedy without them mentioning somebody that's related to this type of comedy, whether it's the Legion of Skanks, the Joe Rogans, the Shane Gillis, that sort of world of edgy, sort of dude like comedy that's also right wing adjacent and holds space for fascists, is anti-trans, is anti-queer. Those people are winning the comedy wars right now. They are. They're booked at every festival. Shane Gillis just hosted Saturday Night Live. Like, you know what I mean? You don't see Amanda Seals hosting Saturday Night Live, you know,
No. Yeah.
but Shane Gillis will.
Well,
And it's so that they can act, and then they're gonna. You get to literally host Saturday Night Live, and then you're going to act like you're the victim. Still, he fell upwards
well,
into that gig. He got fired from the show, and then they're not victims, but that sells. And these right wingers will put they'll just fund money into these people if they think that they're being canceled. Being canceled is the biggest profit motivator for any of these people. And all those guys whose shows got canceled, their Patreons went through the roof afterwards. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah. Well, it's like a thing where you say, like, you make one transphobic joke or you say the R word, then all of a sudden you have a Netflix special called Triggered. So it's just like,
Correct.
it's very, and like, that's why I mentioned the fact that I do think Shane Gillis is funny because he doesn't have to do this. I get why a lot of these dudes have to do this. They have no discernible talent. So they're just like, all I have to do is, oh, I'm not funny. You guys are, I mean, I'm not unfunny. You guys are just triggered. I just said this word and you crybaby liberals couldn't take it. Like he
Correct.
doesn't have to do anything. That's another thing that disappoints me about Dave Chappelle is he does not have to do this. He's a good writer. He's funny. He's sharp. Or at least he used to be. So he shouldn't be falling into that trap of like this cop out of just being like, okay, you guys just are too PC to understand me. And I could count on my hands. I've been doing comedy for 5 years, which is not that long, but still, I can count on my hands the number of times I've been on a show where I'm not the only Black woman. So
Right.
it's always been funny to me that these people who I've seen plenty of shows that are all white men, never seen one that's like all black women, but somehow they're being phased out.
Right. It's asinine. Yeah. Like Shane Gillis and these people have never been more popular than they are now. And it, yeah, and they love to act like that they're being canceled and they're being victimized. Like, they're supposedly, these sort of edgelord white people are, quote unquote, the, silent minority or whatever, but they're not silent and they're a majority of the people. Like, you're not losing. They act like, and and I'm sort of, making broad generalizations. It's not just Shane Gillis or Louis J. Gomez or Dave Smith and these people, but it's a whole like movement and type of people in comedy, a whole thing that's been happening where they act like they're losing, like, oh, you can't say anything in comedy anymore. Comedy is so woke, comedy is so PC, but majority of comedy is them. They dominate the comedy scene. The comedy clubs, comedy bookings is more people like them than quote unquote woke people, than queer people. But just any existence of us, anything that's not them 100%, they act as if it's like an affront to them. That's what, white people do in general, straight people, like any existence of something else is like it's an affront to them. They want the whole pie. They don't want to share pieces of the pie. And it's all, yeah, it's all part of the culture war of just to act like they're under attack constantly by these scary trans people and queer people, and they're going after free speech. They like to weaponize this idea of like our free speech is under attack, and they're framing it like that. Shane Gillis, any of the criticism is because people don't like free speech. The reason why Louis J. Gomez and those guys were canceled in Seattle is because of free speech. They're attacking comedy, which is the most sacred thing on earth, and we speak truth to power, but they don't do any of that. And their free speech only applies to them. They want to have free speech to be able to say the R word on Saturday Night Live, but they don't want you and me to have the free speech to say, hey, that kind of sucked.
Yeah.
So I get really worked up about this stuff. And there's both of these things happening at the same time. It's not coincidence either, because these are the people that all roll together. It's like a scene in the comedy, like the alt-right edgelord and mostly New York-based comics that kind of work out of the Stand in New York City, which is owned by a hardcore Zionist. They have fundraisers for Israel there all the time, and that's like the hub for most of these folk. The Legions of Skanks and the the Joe Rogan types of, so it's either New York there or Austin, where every city, the worst comic, most edgelord douchebag in every city has moved to Austin now. Because there's Joe Rogan's mothership and the Creek in the Cave. So the Creek in the Cave is a comedy club that used to be in New York City. It used to be cool. It used to be like the spot for up and coming comics. Then in about 2017, Louis J. Gomez and the Legions of Skanks hosted their podcast there with guest Milo Yiannopoulos, or whatever that douchebag guy name was. Remember him? Big hardcore fascist like guy. Yeah, he was at the Creek in the Cave on Louis J. Gomez's live podcast at the Creek in the Cave, and it was a big deal. People got mad, and the Creek in the Cave has now moved to Austin with Joe Rogan so that they can further create this like edgelord right wing, right adjacent bubble, because they're not all hard right, but they hold space for alt right people. Like they have, like I said, they have Milo on their podcast. They have Gavin McGinnis and Richard Spencer, and it's like, oh, it's comedy. But if your comedy is all leaning that way, it's, I don't know. I digress. I could blow smoke out of my ears talking about the edgelord comedian to alt-right pipeline. It's very much a real thing. And in my mind, you can't separate everything that's been going on in this country in the last 10 years, the Trumpism of it all, with also the sort of edgelord stuff. It's all kind of the same. They are they are in control of things and are acting like the victim, like at all times. And I highly recommend people go, if you want to know more about this, go look up some of Seth Simon's writing. He's the one that's written a lot of stuff about Louis J. Gomez and Shane Gillis and the Legion of Skanks and all the terrible like things that they do, the people that they've platformed. And they want to have free speech to be able to say whatever they want. Well, we also want to have free speech to be able to say they fucking suck.
Yep.
Take a break. Well, we're probably right now. I see the timer. We're probably right about time to take a break here and then come back and talk about what's our top 3 DC characters. That's what we're discussing this week, right?
Yep.
We got do you have anything else that you want to add about this whole thing, this topic?
No, I have said my piece.
Yeah.
I just
100%.
my final thought is you could say whatever you want, just be prepared to back it up. Like, if you say some
Right.
bullshit and suffer consequences, you haven't been canceled. You are facing the consequences of your actions. That goes for anybody, anywhere. Anything you say, there's consequences. You can't just say whatever you want and expect people not to react.
Right. And the canceling is not even real for most of their canceling is them being more popular, more profitable,
Yeah,
and more
they're
successful.
rewarded for it.
Canceling brings you up, like that's their favorite thing in the world is to be canceled because that's their number one selling point. But all right, I digress. Let's take a break and then we'll be back in a moment. We're going to talk about all things DC and maybe I'll be a little more calm and less angry because I get very frustrated and worked up by the right-wing infestation, edgelord infestation of the comedy industry and their insistence that they're the victim and they're the minority when they are in fact the controlling power in our industry. And I digress for the 10th time. Let's take a break. We'll be back soon.
Okay, hey everyone, welcome back from break. Well, I guess again, you guys probably weren't on break, but we were. I took a quick little nap. We're well rested and ready to do our weekly top 3. So for today's topic, we're going to do our top 3 DC Comics characters. Usually we go back and forth, but this time I think, Mike, I think you should give your top 3 and then I'll give mine.
Oh, okay. Do you
Because
want
I
me
have
to
a
do a
lot
little?
to say.
Okay, do you want me to tell a little bit about each one, or just
Yeah,
like list them? Okay, so
yeah, tell a little bit about each one.
all right, and then I have more to say about each one after, but I'll give a little bit about each. So my first favorite DC character. So yeah, is the easy choice for me. Number 1 favorite character, Pamela Isley, Poison Ivy.
Okay.
Absolute best character in all of DC. She is a eco-anarchist, basically. She's an eco-anarchist activist, and she's the character in all of DC that I'm most politically aligned with. I love her character. I mean, particularly what made me really, really, really fall in love with the character is her on the Harley Quinn cartoon on HBO, which is my favorite DC thing ever made. And I didn't put Harley Quinn on my list just because I didn't. I like Poison Ivy as a character better, but I very easily could have put Harley Quinn on my list, but I chose not to just because I didn't. I could have. It could have been all Batman villains, or all Batman's like rogues gallery for me. But Poison Ivy is the best. And interestingly enough, she's played by Lake Bell in in that cartoon. That's her voice. And Lake in Poison Ivy, I thought it was kind of interesting. Like there's a nature theme going there. But that's my favorite DC thing ever. is that cartoon, and Poison Ivy is especially awesome in that. Queer eco-anarchist, the best. She rules. So that would be my number one. And I'm sure you'll have some thoughts about that, but you want me to go through each one, you said, right?
Yeah.
Okay. My second pick is, I think, a little bit more of a deep cut. But the second character on my list is Crazy Jane from Doom Patrol.
Oh, yes.
Are you familiar with the
Pokemon.
show Doom Patrol?
Oh yeah, I love Crazy Jane. I love
Doom
Doom Patrol. I
Patrol
love the comics.
is it is a quite the interesting show. It's very hard to follow. It gets even more confusing as the seasons go on, but there's nothing like it on television, where there's literally characters who are like butts on their head and like all kinds of wackadoodle stuff. But Crazy Jane is the best character in the show. She's played by Diane Guerrero from Orange is the New Black, which is one of my all-time favorite shows ever. I'm obsessed with Orange is the New Black. It's always been, long time been one of my favorite shows. And Diane Guerrero plays what's her name? Maritza, I believe. She's friends with, are you familiar with that show? Have you seen it? Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So you know who the character is, right? She's friends with Flocka, and yeah, they're like doing all the beauty tips and like beauty blogging while they're in prison in Orange is the New Black. Yeah, that's Diane Guerrero, and she is awesome. I love her as an actress. She's so good. Crazy Jane is a character that has, I mean, ableism of the name aside, crazy. I know we're not supposed to say that, but Crazy Jane is a character with multiple personalities, and she has childhood trauma, and so she's created these multiple personalities. And on the show Doom Patrol, which is what I'm most familiar with her from, Diane Guerrero plays most of those personalities, but they're all like separate characters with their own thought process, mannerisms, like everything. And so she basically plays like 30 characters in the show that are all part of the same character. And then there's part when they go into her mind and you're seeing all the pieces like in her mind. And then to make things even cooler, so also I should say that in addition to being really, really a great actress and a really great character, Diane Guerrero is like one of the most beautiful people to ever live on Earth. Just incredibly good looking, breathtakingly attractive. And she also, in the fourth season, she meets this character, Space Case, who's played by Madeline Zima, who's also an actress that I really, really love. She was on one of my other like old favorite shows from when I was younger, which is Californication. Did you ever watch Californication?
No, I was too young for that.
Okay, yeah, because you're just a
I
few
want to
years
go
younger
back
than
and
me.
watch it though.
When that show
Yeah.
came out in like 2008 to 2014, it was the coolest thing I had ever seen in my life. Like, but Madeline Zima is one of the main characters in that show, and that's where I first seen her from. And then she plays Space Case, which is like basically the young girl's character is, she created this, it's like the character in her mind from the comic book she reads comes to life, and it's like this almost like a Captain Marvel type character. And Space Case and Crazy Jane end up together, like spoiler alert, but they're a queer relationship. So Crazy Jane is also a queer character. So I like that show, and that show's super cool if you've not seen it. Brendan Fraser is the voice of this robot thing, and you can't quite, it's hard to explain the show without, like, it's just the most mind-bogglingly weird show ever, and it's pretty cool.
One thing I will add here, a fun fact. I don't know if you've ever seen Umbrella Academy on
Love it, love
Netflix.
it, love it.
So Gerard Way from My Chemical Romance, when he was writing the Umbrella Academy comics, he was heavily inspired by the Doom Patrol comics. So if
Makes
you like
sense.
Umbrella Academy, definitely watch Doom Patrol.
That's
Read the
how I started
comics.
watching Doom
So good.
Patrol, is because I watched Umbrella Academy, and then somebody recommended Doom Patrol to me
Yep,
because it's
that
similar.
makes sense.
Yeah. And like I said, it gets a little weird as the seasons go on. I had to, like,
Oh
3 and
yeah.
4, I had to, like, there's several episodes I watched multiple times because I couldn't remember where I left off, because I would watch it and I'm like, I can't even remember what's going on. It's so confusing, but eventually you kind of figure it out. But it's really complicated. It's like, it's bizarre, but it's really great. And I wanted to give a mention to that show. So that'd be my second pick. And my third pick is kind of a more of a obvious one, not obvious, but I guess more of a very well-known character, and that would be Mr. Edward Nygma, the Riddler.
Oh, yes.
One of my
Yes.
favorites ever. Like, he's such a good character. Like I said, I could have done this list as all basically Batman villains because that's my most exposure to DC. I've seen all the Batman movies. Like, I watch Batman stuff. I don't really love Batman, but I like Gotham. I like that world. It's like the Rogues Gallery are great. I love the Joker. I could have mentioned Joker, but that seems too cliche. It's just like I could have mentioned Harley Quinn, but that's like both of them kind of seemed too talked about. Like, but I do love both of those characters. But Riddler. So I am a huge defender of Batman Forever. I think it's a great movie. The third of the live action Batman movies, which the Val Kilmer one, that's my Batman. Val Kilmer is my Batman. And at the time when that movie came out, it was the coolest movie I'd ever seen because not only was it cool and fun and beautiful and Batman, but it had one of my favorite actors at the time and still to this day playing the Riddler, which is Jim Carrey. And his performance as the Riddler is just so great, even though that movie is ridiculous. Like, he's throwing balls like they're baseballs and kicking his leg in the air. But no, that I love that's where I first fell in love with the Riddler, is that character, is the Jim Carrey Riddler. From the even the Edward Nygma part too, I loved that guy too. He was all weird, weird sort of goofy guy with glasses, Edward Nygma, and he's like the disgruntled employee, and he's got like the brain sucker thing on his head, and Batman Forever. It's so great, and of course he's a great villain in throughout the comics and in the cartoons. And two other appearances of Riddler I want to talk about. The other one is in the most recent The Batman with
good.
What's his name?
So
Robert
good.
Pattinson. So this is a very different Riddler. This is Paul Dano playing the Riddler. You've seen the movie, right? Of course.
Oh yeah.
And it's a much darker Riddler. And for those that haven't seen it, he's almost like Antifa. He's almost like an anti-fascist type. Like, he is an anarchist, and he's going after like rich people and the system, and like he basically gets this whole army of like people that kind of join his cause, and he's basically like a revolutionary kind of leader in that way, and completely different than the Jim Carrey Riddler. But I also love Paul Dano as an actor, very great, really great as a Riddler. So I love both of those very different interpretations of it. One of them is green and colorful and fun and wacky. The other one's kind of dark and trench coaty and like, and then a third appearance of the Riddler that I wanted to talk about is, as I've mentioned, the Harley Quinn cartoon. Riddler is so fucking funny on that show. He plays sort of this like kind of like squirrely little guy, and then by the end of it, but at least in the more recent seasons, he ends up like getting super fit, losing a bunch of weight, and coming out as gay, and then like marrying or dating Clock King, and has like this weird sort of dysfunctional gay relationship with Clock King. And Riddler is just so funny on that show. I can't remember who does his voice off my top of my head, but I love a Riddler. So my three DC characters then, to sum up, that I brought up here are Poison Ivy, Crazy Jane, and the Riddler. But I would also, like I said, put an honorable mention in there for, say, Joker, Harley Quinn, that kind of stuff. So
all right,
that is my DC pitch. The floor is yours.
So there is a reason I had you just list all of yours first, because I knew we would have the same list. So I picked 9 just in case you had some repeats. And all 3 of yours are on my list of 9. So it's a good thing I did
wow.
that.
So okay, cool. So at least I know what I'm talking about here.
Yeah, I grew up basically feeling like I was Crazy Jane. Fucking, I did a comedy show actually where I was dressed up as Poison Ivy, and I put the show on just so I could be Poison Ivy. And as for the Riddler, do you remember when Batman Forever came out and then McDonald's did like the glass
cups.
mugs?
Yeah.
Yeah. So all my siblings, we had all of them, and I had the Riddler mug. I still have it to this day.
That's
I drank my
awesome.
coffee out of it this morning.
That's incredible. I have a CD copy of the Batman Forever soundtrack that I have in my car and I play often. That's my Batman Forever thing. And while we're talking about that movie and the Riddler, one of the coolest parts of it is like one of the first times that you see Adam Enigma is this really, really cool Flaming Lip song is playing. And it's
Oh,
just like,
yes.
it's such a good song. It's called Bad Days. And it's like, you know, you hate your boss at your job. And in your dreams, you can blow his head off. It's just like, it's like this sort of like weird little bizarre song and Flaming Lips. And the whole thing is just perfect. But sorry, it's your turn.
All right, so I'll reshuffle my list. Let me look at it real quick. So
What about
in
Poison
the
Ivy? What do you
number
think of that?
Poison Ivy, I loved Uma Thurman as Poison Ivy. That look
Oh,
is one of
right.
my favorite looks
Oh,
for
right. You
Poison
mentioned that because
Ivy.
you did the cosplay. Sorry, I forgot you did address that. My bad. Go ahead.
All right, so my three, in the number three spot, I'm gonna put the Scarecrow. Scarecrow has always been one of my favorite villains. I think the idea that his power is fear is just so, especially as a kid, so perfect. He's so scary. Especially one of my favorite portrayals of him is Cillian Murphy. And I think, is
Hmm.
that the only live action portrayal of Scarecrow? One of the few.
I I believe so. Yes.
Yeah.
Hold on one second.
So Cillian Murphy was he's just a creepy dude. He's so beautiful, but he plays creepy so well. And just that, as well as in the Arkham Asylum games, the Batman games, that
Mm.
Scarecrow was almost like a Freddy Krueger-esque take on the character. And being the horror fan that I am, I absolutely loved it. Playing those levels was still so scary, even though I was way too old to be scared of that. But the Scarecrow is just a great character design, and just an amazing concept. And number two, I have
I,
Wonder Woman, also tied with Nubia, because I can't leave
interesting.
Nubia out. One of the greatest Black superheroes is Nubia. And Wonder Woman, any queer girl loves Wonder Woman. I mean, it's like she's this hot
Hmm.
girl tying you up and like just kicking ass. Like, what more could you want? She comes from a planet with only bad bitches. Like, of course, I want to be
Oh,
on an
right.
island with bad bitches and Wonder Woman. But it's just like the first like girl superhero you're into. If you're Black, it's probably Storm. But so for me, it was Storm, then Wonder Woman. But every like one of my nieces, that's how you get little girls into comic books is with Wonder Woman. And that's always been so important for me. Now, for number one, I'm gonna put Catwoman.
Okay. Yeah, that was some potential for me too.
I do not acknowledge white Catwoman. Catwoman is Black to me. My Catwoman is Black. So she,
So no Michelle Pfeiffer for you.
I mean, she was great, but
Yeah,
I don't even like a
yeah.
blonde Catwoman. I
Eartha
mean, Julie
Kitt.
Newmar was also great, but I want like Eartha Kitt. Eartha Kitt to me is Catwoman in real life. So
Hmm.
she's just, she's not a villain per se. She's just stealing from rich people, as we all should.
Correct.
Anytime I'm
Good
in Walmart
praxis.
and I use the self-checkout, I feel like Catwoman too. So I
Yeah,
just love
she's a
her.
great
She's so
character.
cool,
Selena,
so
right? That's her name.
sexy.
Selena.
Yeah, Selena Kyle.
Kyle. That's it. Selena and Kyle. Yeah, yeah. That's a great. Those are great picks. I love also.
I
I like.
also,
Oh, go ahead.
yeah, yeah, also in my list of potentials, just in case you stole any of these characters, I also had Nightwing, Constantine, and Black Lightning.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, that's a good. I like majority of those characters would be on my list. I have some comments about each real quick. So
Okay,
Scarecrow,
yeah.
I love. Great pick. I like the Cillian Murphy Scarecrow. That's great, but my favorite Scarecrow is so I'm sure you're aware of this, but Batman and Scooby-Doo exist in the same universe. They are in a
Yep.
shared universe, and there's a huge crossover between them. One being Scooby-Doo and Batman Brave and the Bold, which is one of my favorite like cartoon movies. I watch all the Scooby-Doo movies, and Batman comes in a lot. And that was the crossover with Batman and the Bold.
Yeah.
But however, in 2020, I want to say, or 2021, they came out with this movie, Scooby-Doo Halloween or something. I can't remember the exact name of it. But in that movie, the main villain is the Scarecrow, and he and Scooby Doo have to team up with Elvira and Bill Nye to defeat the Scarecrow,
I
and
have
it's
actually
great. They have to
never
escape
seen
from
this, and
Arkham.
that is so upsetting to me.
Yeah, I'll have to send it to you. It's great. Both of the like this the Scarecrow one, and then also the Brave and the Bold one is awesome. Shaggy
Yeah,
plays Nightwing. He wears
I've seen that
that
one,
one. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. The Shaggy as Nightwing is great.
It's so good.
Yeah, and of course I love Catwoman. She's fantastic. She's great in the cartoons. She's great in the movie. She was good in that Batman movie. What's her name? Lenny Kravitz Jr.
Oh, Zoe
There.
Kravitz, yeah.
Zoe Kravitz. Yeah, third generation nepo baby. There. She's still good despite that. But yeah, that was a great choice. And what was the other one you said? Oh, Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman,
Wonder
I
Woman
never
and Nubia.
really like. Yeah, Nubia. I don't know a ton about Wonder Woman. I always kind of like. I get like why she's important and iconic and all that stuff, but like I never really read DC, so I never really saw a lot of Wonder Woman. Most of my DC experience is all going to be in the Batman world, and Wonder Woman didn't really show up there. And I can't
Yeah,
stand
and we
Gal
don't
Gadot.
acknowledge Gal Gadot. Get that
Correct. That's what
Zionist
it is. The
hoe out of
Zionist
here.
of
We
it
don't
all.
acknowledge
She's an
her.
IDF soldier, and so that's kind of like turned me off to Wonder Woman just recently. But the character in itself is like super important and awesome, and yeah, that's a pretty good list. I like those picks. Um, yeah.
Thank you.
So,
And if you'll notice, I left Superman off, even though he is one of my favorite superheroes of all time. So I would like to hear what are your thoughts on Superman?
um, I think of as I sit here, if you could see on video, I sit here in the Seinfeld apartment. That was my Superman reference because he's obsessed with Superman, and I think Superman is. And I know this is going to be a cliche argument. It's the most boring superhero to me. Like it, he's got all the powers, and he's just like he could fly, he could do all this stuff, and he's boring to me. Every movie that they've made of Superman has been bad to me. I haven't seen a good Superman movie. Um, I never really got into him as a character. It just he doesn't excite me. He's always played just by like a boring sort of looking guy, just like I don't know, just like a regular guy. Like I don't know, it's just the same type of guy, and he just I don't know a ton about him honestly, but he's just boring to me, and yeah.
Okay, so first I'm going to say you should watch. They just recently made an animated movie of one of my favorite Superman stories. So it's called Superman Red Sun,
Oh,
where
I heard of this.
instead of landing in the United States, baby Kal-El lands in the Ukraine and becomes like a Soviet soldier.
Oh,
So he's working with like the communists to kind of like take down the United States. It's a very interesting retelling of the character.
interesting.
And I think you'd like it. But the reason I've always connected with Superman, I feel like people when they talk about him, they say, "Oh, he's this boring white guy, like US propaganda, whatever." But I view Superman from the opposite lens. As a person of color, he's one of the first superheroes I was able to connect to. So if you look at his origin story, Superman is an alien. He's a literal alien.
Mm.
He came to this country, was adopted by this nice white family, and kind of did everything right. He went to college. If we're looking at Clark Kent, not Superman, he went to college. He became a journalist, but he's still all in this like mostly white town he grew up in. All of these people look at him like, who is this kid? He's not from here. We don't trust him. So he does have that like
What do they know
I've
about him
been
in his
through that.
backstory? Like the people in the town that just know he was like adopted or something, or
Yeah, they just know he was adopted because the Kents, like everyone knows each other. Everyone knows the Kents didn't
right.
like have a child and
And
they
there's some mystery
didn't
around
go
how
through
and why they
adoption.
adopted him, right? Because he just sort of showed up,
Yeah,
right? He like
yeah,
fell
he
in their
just popped up
backyard,
on them.
basically, right?
Yep. So people in the town are kind of distrustful of him always, and he never truly fits in. And as someone who went through a similar path, I grew up poor, grew up in the hood. I'm a Black woman, but I did everything I'm supposed to do. I went to a good school, I got a good job, and it's still like that feeling of you're still not like us, you still don't fit in.
I see.
And so even the conflict between Batman and Superman, Batman is this like extremely privileged white man who is like, Superman's not from here. We we as a people don't treat him well, but he's so powerful, more so than he even realizes. So he might snap on us. So we have to keep him in check. So that's kind of
I
always the
see.
relationship that Batman has had with Superman and many of the other people, like the
Because he's
citizens of
different and he's from
Metropolis.
somewhere else, he's scary. He's an outsider, so that makes him dangerous to them.
Yeah.
I see.
And yeah, and a lot of people view
It's a very
Superman as like a
interesting
Boy
point. Go ahead.
Scout. Yeah, they view him as like a Boy Scout. They view him as boring. But Superman knows this. He knows he's not from there. He has this people. It's like this, Krypton diaspora where he has these people that he's not connected to. The only culture he's ever really known is the white Midwest United States culture. He has no connection to Krypton. He didn't grow up there. His cousin, Supergirl, is from there, but it's a
I
similar
was
thing.
just
She
gonna
also
mention
grew
something
up.
about that.
Yeah.
So I seen
So he,
Supergirl in the oh go ahead.
yeah, I was gonna say he grew up, around these white people who don't trust him, who view him as an other, who are kind of afraid of him. And even when he is being Superman, this situation where he's supposed to be exceptional and supposed to be someone who's held in high regard, even the other superheroes are still like, he's not from here, he's too powerful, we don't trust him, we have to minimize him. So that's something I always connected to in Superman.
I see. Interesting. Um, two thoughts quick, because one is that I did see, like I think I mentioned last week when I was talking about Black Lightning that I watched some of the CW shows to sort of understand that whole story arc, and it was kind of interested. Or wait, maybe no, I'm mixing up the CW with the new Flash movie. I think the
Mhm.
Supergirl's in the Flash movie, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's I found that see that the stuff with Supergirl is kind of found interesting. The idea that like he has an existence on the other planet and there's like a whole relationship with his home planet and the other people there. Like he may be Superman here, but he's Kal-El there, and she's or whatever. Like that
Mhm.
I kind of found interesting. But my thought, okay, so don't kill me for this one, but like the idea that Superman is like this outsider. I get to you related to him. That's awesome. But to me, I'm like, he's like this outsider or something is like the same as, Taylor Swift singing about how she's like, a misunderstood outsider. Like you're the majority. You're like a good looking white guy who's like got all these powers and stuff. Um, I don't know. It just like, yeah, but I get what you're saying though, the whole like immigrant thing of it. But it's I don't know. It just the whole. I guess I would need to read more and watch more because my understanding of it is very like baseline and stuff. But it just seems
Well,
he's got all these powers, and then there's just this like crystal that could kill him, and that's it.
well, why do you accept that the X-Men are marginalized when some of them are white, but Superman can't be marginalized?
Don't you go get making turning my arguments against me here. Um, I mean that's a good point. I guess if I were to like change my brain to think about Superman as a mutant, that might be different. You know,
Yeah.
like yeah,
He
that's a good
also
way
is
to think of
this
it.
poor kid from the Midwest living in Metropolis. So he's seen as like, kind of trashy in that sense.
Right.
Then
Yeah,
the
he's from like
people in
Illinois or
his
Indiana, right?
hometown, yeah, the people in his
I've been to
hometown
Metropolis.
also. The people in his hometown also don't trust him because he just came from nowhere. So they don't see him as, even though he looks white. So it's the same thing as like a white passing minority or people who, try to get all these accolades to fit in with white people or people who code switch too hard and think, okay,
I
I'm doing
see.
all these things to fit in with white people. I'm one of them. They're still not going to see you as one of them. And it's a similar thing with Superman.
I see. So he's sort of like a white Midwest working class icon. So you're saying he's kind of like Kid Rock?
Yeah, Superman is exactly like Kid Rock.
Sorry, I couldn't help it. Um, I mean, maybe I guess uh you've helped a little bit, but I still think that like he's boring. I don't know. Just as a kid, I never was like even drawn to Superman cartoons. Like there's Justice League and Superman cartoons and stuff, but I never got into it or never watched it, and it's the character that you're most exposed to. Maybe that's part of the reason why. Like in my head, I think of like Superman as like a boomer superhero. Like he's like
Yeah,
old people's favorite superhero because he's the only one they know. So to me, it's like that's the only superhero that my parents knew when I was a kid or something, where like they never heard
yeah,
of Spider-Man or the X-Men and stuff like that. But Superman
yeah.
is
I
like
think it.
Superman's the guy who's at Six Flags when you're a kid, They're like his picture, like he was like corny to me though. I don't know.
Yeah, it's that issue of people just see Superman as like he's wearing the red, white, and blue, and he has a cape and he's flying. But if
Yeah,
you like read like Injustice comics, which is based on the video game from the creators of Mortal Kombat, but if you read the Injustice comics, if you read Superman Red Sun, if you like actually get into some of his storyline, there's good shit there. He's an interesting character. And just that struggle he has where he could the fact that he has the ability to just kill all of his oppressors with the snap of a finger. That's something that like I thought about if I had that power. It's
yeah, but then he
it's a very
doesn't though.
interesting thing to meditate on. The fact that he has to constantly protect his oppressors when he has the power to just
I see.
do
He
whatever he
could
wants to them
he
because
could go
he's so
full
much more powerful.
Homelander.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I still do like I picture him like Homelander. Like the way that they depicted Homelander in The Boys is like the way I think of Superman almost. But I mean that's like a darker version of it. But I kind
Oh,
of
for sure.
yeah, but he's not acting like that. And that's like the difference is he has the power to
Yeah.
be that way. I get what you're saying. With great power comes great responsibility. He has the
Yes,
power that he
exactly.
can do anything, but he chooses not to do that. It's interesting. Is there do you like any of the Superman movies? Is there one that you would recommend me revisiting? That's good.
No.
No, they're all bad, right?
Just
Red
watch
Sun, no,
the
check out Red
animated
Sun. Oh, right,
Superman.
cartoon.
Yeah, watch the animated Red Sun. Some of the animated movies are pretty good and depict him more realistically or more true to the comics. The problem with Superman is he could be such a blank slate character. People don't focus on when they write the movies, they're not focusing on his internal battles, which is what makes Spider-Man so interesting. Or
Right.
his consciousness, the fact that he's like constantly probably on the verge of becoming Homelander. And a lot of us would in his situation. But it's like
We
he
see how cops act
chooses to be a good
when
person.
you give him power. Like a lot of people, power corrupts. And okay, that's interesting because he has this nobility to him that he has this great power, but he doesn't like go do bad. He could have taken over the whole world and he could be Lex Luthor or whatever, but he's not.
Yeah, and I think that's why he has the Fortress of Solitude, where he's just like,
Mm.
these humans try me every day. Like he has no solace when he's
So he just
Superman.
goes and
There's
meditates in
this
the ice,
rich
right?
white dude. Yeah. So when he's Superman, he has this rich white dude, Batman, who's like, I don't trust him. We shouldn't trust him. And then when he's Clark Kent, he still has all these like Midwestern white people who are like, who is this guy? He just popped up out of nowhere. He's not from here. We don't trust him. So he never has an opportunity to just relax. It's these constant microaggressions that he has to deal
Mm.
with and still help and protect these people.
I know all about microaggressions. I put the mic in microaggression. But okay, that's interesting. All right. I mean, maybe I'll give him another chance. based on this argument, but I still have my doubts about Superman, but that's all right. I don't have to love everything, but I also haven't really given it a chance. So, but now I've quickly realized right now that it's my turn to pick the top 3 for next week, which I forgot that I had to do before. I didn't think about that. So I'm gonna try to come up with one right now, and I wanted to maybe veer a little bit away from just talking about superheroes, because the last couple have all been superhero centric. So let me think. Why don't we do okay, so since we talked about This Fool today, which was like a show that we think is a great show that was canceled too soon, what would be your top 3 TV shows that were canceled too soon? You
Oh,
know,
okay, I like that.
Yeah, so a show that you like that got canceled. It could be in the past, or it could be currently, or whatever. Then it could be comic book related, superhero related if you want, but it also can be, anything. If you want to come in here and say Two Guys, a Girl, and a Pizza Place is your favorite show or something, you might be too young to even know that reference. It was a canceled sick. It was the one season sitcom when I was a kid that didn't last very long. And it just had a funny name: Two Guys, a Girl, and a Pizza Place. And I believe Ryan Reynolds was in it, actually. He was one of the 2 guys, maybe.
Oh.
Or somebody famous was. I can't remember. Totally off topic. Doesn't matter. If that's one of your favorite canceled too soon shows, we can talk about that next week. I guess, I was going to say something else, but we don't really have time to get into all that. But I think that's pretty good for a first episode. I think next week we might have a guest. I'm going to try to get that situated. And this has been something of a Spider-Man, or something of a Superman discussion, something of a DC discussion, again, something of a Saturday Night Live discussion, again, something of a television discussion. And I think this is probably something of a conclusion for this episode. Anything else to add, Kai VonDoom?
No, I think I've said enough.
All
I'm
right,
still
sounds
worked up
good.
about Superman now.
I'm still worked up about Saturday Night Live, so. Sorry, you can follow us on Instagram at Something of a Pod. You're either of us, Kai VonDoom or Mike Gamms. We're on all the socials. Something of a Podcast is on YouTube, and we're on all the podcast apps and all that stuff. If you're listening to this, you probably know that. But it'd be helpful if you like, subscribe, comment. I don't know how this stuff works, but whatever you can do to interact, share, whatever, I think it helps us. And we're just going to keep doing this. And we have something of a loose schedule. And that's about it. So I guess we will talk to y'all next month, or next week, which will be next month. So this is the last episode of Black History Month. So make sure you enjoy the last few days, Kai, because next month I'm coming in full tilt with the microaggressions. It's mask off, Black History Month's over. No, I'm just teasing you. All right, on that note, all right, I'll see y'all later.
I'm something of a podcast myself. I'm something of a podcast myself. I'm something of a podcast. I'm something of a podcast. I'm something of a podcast myself.